I was 22 at the time and living in a very small one-bedroom house in the cheapest area of my city. After work on a Friday night, I hopped online to play a game with a bunch of my friends. It was the perfect and cozy winter night for staying up late with cold weather outside and no work or school the next day. Everything was closed due to heavy blizzard for 3 days. I had a blanket over me and played for probably 2 hours before a sudden sound had me put everything on pause for a minute. It was a thump sounding like it was upstairs. My initial concern was a possible breakage in the roof caused by the storm outside, so I went up to look. The only rooms upstairs were a single bedroom and a half bathroom, and neither of them had any signs of breakage anywhere. So I ran back down and got back online with my friends. I was on for a while, only getting off at 2 a.m. because everyone else went to bed. I shut everything off and sat on the couch with some snacks and tea for the weather, while I watched YouTube on my phone. I felt kind of relaxed and cozy for some time until something strange happened. 10 minutes in, I heard another thump from upstairs again, but it was so muffled that it almost sounded like it was on the roof or something. I went up to see, and when I was about to open the bedroom door in the corridor upstairs, I heard someone whispering inside, as if someone was talking and laughing. I opened the door quickly and everything went quiet. There was no one in the room. Then I felt as if picture frames on the walls were trembling like an earthquake, but I couldn't figure out the reason for it. I was sure it wasn't the storm either because it vibrated through the walls like something literally hitting the house. After 10 minutes of looking around, I was so determined to figure it out that I put on my jacket, muffler on my neck, and shoes to go out into the storm and see if there was something more noticeable from outside. While standing outside, I could still hear sinister thumps coming from inside the house. All of a sudden, I caught sight of a shadowy figure in the window at the top of the house. I could see its creepy smile, and it was looking right at me. I ran inside the house and went upstairs. The window was higher than the bedroom window, meaning it had to be an attic. I had no idea there was an attic in this house. This hidden window was the first clue I'd ever seen to indicate there was an attic. I went to search for the hatch that would open the attic door. It took a minute, but to my surprise, I found it inside my bedroom closet. It was small and perfectly smooth, with the ceiling basically blending in aside from the tiny gaps from where it opened. I stood up on a box and pulled it down, releasing a rusty ladder from the opening. Immediately, I was hit with a rotten smell, followed by another thump sound. I climbed up carefully and looked into this tiny space, basically a wide, dark tunnel. In the end, by the window, I saw a crooked figure ducked down on all fours and looking straight at me with a creepy smile on its face. Its eyes were glowing with the flashlight in my hand that reflected from his eyes. I almost fell off the ladder, trying to jump down and run away. I heard him shuffling around as I got my phone and left the house, calling 911 in my driveway. The cops got there despite the storm and detained the man. He never said why he was there or what he wanted to do, but the police took him with them. While getting into the cop car, he was still looking at me with a creepy smile and furious look on his face. Everything about it was almost unbelievable. I moved out very soon after that, and in every house since I've always checked the attics. But the one thing that has stayed with me is the image of that man at the end of the attic on his hands and knees, staring at me with eyes resembling both fear and anger. This happened when I was 18. I had just finished up my first semester of college, and a couple of friends I had met there planned to rent out a cabin on some lake over the weekend through Airbnb. They asked if I wanted to go, and I said yeah. I didn't know much about the destination, but I decided I'd go regardless. I was done with finals, and college was off for a few days due to heavy snow falling. Honestly, I didn't want to spend it all at home, so I felt like I could just use some solid time away from it all. So my two friends Smith and Alex were set to leave with me. The cabin was about an hour away. When we arrived, we unpacked the stuff we brought for the weekend and got settled inside. We enjoyed it during the daytime, but as the night fell, the snow falling, which we enjoyed in the morning, became intense, and it turned into a snowstorm. So the first night was honestly kinda creepy, at least for me because the cabin was pretty remote and we were stuck inside it due to a heavy snowstorm outside. The lake was just beside the cabin, which was frozen by that time. But all things considered, the first night was completely fine as compared to how the snowstorm struck us on the second night. It was the second night when things took a dark turn. Throughout the second day, a blizzard took place outside. We didn't really plan for it, I guess. None of us thought to check the weather before making the trip. Anyway, on the second night, Smith and I slept in our bedrooms upstairs, while Alex slept on a couch downstairs in the cabin. All of us could feel the cabin creaking due to the blizzard outside. We could hear the creepy sounds of the wolves and the wind coming from outside, and that scared us all. I think it was around 2 a.m. when Alex came upstairs and woke both of us up. He told us that the light outside the cabin was flickering on its own. I told him that it might be due to the storm or might be some animal that is messing with the switch, so there is nothing to worry about. But what Alex responded with was pretty terrifying. That was what he initially thought too, but after looking outside, he saw what he described as something resembling the shadow of a person, and around 6 feet tall. This definitely freaked us all out a bit, but Smith, who was still convinced it had to be an animal, said he would go downstairs to check it out. And so that's what he did. Meanwhile, Alex and I stayed upstairs. A good 3 minutes went by when a blood-curdling scream rang out downstairs. Alex and I ran downstairs as fast as we could. Smith was lying on the floor and pointing at the living room window. We looked out the window, but there was nothing. The window was open, and the noise of the blizzard outside was enough to scare us all. As we stood there, Smith literally screamed at us to go upstairs, and so the three of us did. The rooms in the cabin didn't have locks, so we blocked the door of the room with some stuff on our own. Smith quietly explained to us that when he got downstairs, he started by looking at all the kitchen windows. He didn't see anything, and then he made his way to the living room window. As he removed a few curtains in front of the window, he got a vision of a dark forest glowing with the snow falling on it. He saw the pure black darkness of the forest. Confused, he cupped his hands to his eyes and got closer to the window. All of a sudden, he noticed just on the left side of the window, there stood a person, looking straight at him. He then screamed and fell back. Now at this point, I hadn't seen anything myself. I was horrified but still insisted to Smith that he might be overthinking, or it must be some kind of reflection in the window. Just then, the power of the cabin cut out. It felt like my heart had completely stopped for at least 5 seconds. We were standing in complete darkness, blizzard outside and someone creepy around our cabin. I felt as if my life was over. We had no weapons and, worse yet, no phone service. All we could do was sit and wait until daylight. All of us could hear someone walking outside our cabin and knocking violently on windows and doors. Then we heard something that, according to all of us, was the main door of the cabin, breaking open as if something had struck it very hard. Then we heard those footsteps in the cabin, and eventually the footsteps started approaching upstairs. The man went into the first room upstairs, and then he came to the one in which we were hiding. He banged at the door, but the barricade blocked him. He tried for some time and then went downstairs surprisingly. We heard his footsteps downstairs for some time until they faded completely. Once the sun was up, we took down the barricade and all started getting our stuff. As we got downstairs, we saw the door lock was broken and the whole cabin was filled with crooked footprints. They were as if a barefooted man was walking there for the whole night. To my surprise, who could walk barefoot in such a blizzard? We got to the fuse box, and it was completely destroyed, as if smashed it multiple times by an axe. The sight of this was enough to get us to leave immediately. Later, we tried contacting the Airbnb owner, but we got no response. I always thought this was weird. I mean, if your fuse box got destroyed, I'd imagine you'd want to talk to the people renting the cabin at the time. But no, not even a text back from the guy. I stayed friends with Smith and Alex throughout the rest of college. We would talk about the experience from time to time, but for the most part, we kept it to ourselves. We still don't know who was stalking us in the woods that night or what their intentions were. My roommate was out of the house for the week, so I had the place to myself. College gave a week off due to an immense snowstorm in the city. I had no plans and nothing I needed to do. On Monday, I was basically trapped inside due to that huge snowstorm blowing through our city. This was common around this time of year, but it still always seemed worse every time. Everything was covered with snow and the house would shake and creak nonstop. Knowing I wouldn't be able to sleep, I decided to just stay up. I turned on the Xbox and started up one of my video games. I played for well over an hour, probably until 11 o'clock when the doorbell rang. I paused the game and got up. But then I remembered the whole storm and everything. Who would be outside right now? I went over to the front door and looked through the peephole. There was nothing. I opened the door. The wind and snow hit me right away, but when I looked around, I didn't see anyone. I closed the door quickly and thought maybe something struck the doorbell due to the storm. There was nothing else I could think of at that time. I went back to my game, but only a couple of minutes later, I heard a huge crash in the backyard, stuff tumbling over and breaking. I immediately knew it was our furniture and ran over to the back door. Everything was scattered around the yard, blowing around in the wind. I quickly put on my jacket and went outside. I started pushing each piece of furniture up against the back of the house. The storm was so heavy it would even hurt sometimes when the snow would hit my face. I was rushing, going as fast as I could until I saw a strange figure of a man. He was standing at the edge of the backyard, covered with an old jacket, beanie, and lots of other old stuff, just standing there still and watching me. I looked back at him for a moment, but then grabbed the last piece of furniture and ran inside to escape the storm. I looked out the back door as I dried off, but the person was gone. I ignored everything as well. I was really unaware of what was about to happen. I sat in the living room this time, just scrolling on my phone because I was tired of being interrupted. After a while, I struggled to keep my eyes open. I got a blanket and laid down on the couch. I didn't feel like going upstairs, and the storm was much louder up there anyway. It took a while, but eventually I drifted into sleep. A few hours later, still well into the night, I woke up from a sudden burst of heavy wind outside, shaking the house. I pulled the blanket to the side and sat up, moving my feet to the floor as I prepared to go check if the furniture outside was still there. But just when my feet touched the floor, they were soaked. It woke me up immediately. I looked down and saw something like a puddle with snow around it on the ground right next to the couch. Then I saw another and another, leading in a line across the floor. Inside the puddles were faint muddy shoe prints and snow on the edges of it. I stood up and ran to the corner of the room, my heart beating rapidly in my chest. After a minute of hearing nothing but the wind outside, I slowly followed the shoe prints. They led throughout the house, upstairs and downstairs, but I could tell that someone entered through the back door, which I had stupidly forgotten to lock in the rush of getting out of the storm. I locked it and pulled my phone out to call 911, but then I heard footsteps above my head. There was someone upstairs. Then I got to know that the person was still inside. I stayed quiet and moved into the corner of the house where I felt the most hidden, and then called 911. I waited in silence for them to arrive. As I heard the siren in that snowstorm, I felt as if someone jumped from the upstairs window on the snow in the backyard, followed by the footsteps running away. Luckily, police came even in the storm, and when they did, they took a look around but found no one. They told me it seemed like a personal attack because nothing was missing. Whoever came in, he just walked right up to me while I was sleeping, and seemingly did nothing but watch me, which is super creepy but doesn't make much sense. Anyhow, I feel lucky that I am safe.